July 17, 2014 saw perhaps the most tragic event in the history of Donbass. On that luckless day, Malaysian passenger plane Boeing 777, flight MH17, was shot down over the Donetsk People Republic. It was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. 298 people died. How could this happen? Who shot down the Boeing and how did they do it? Why did it become possible? These are the questions with no answers. Official Kiev put the blame on Donbass militia and Russia. Russia, in its turn, provides convincing evidence of its innocence. In this regard, I will briefly remind you of Moscow's main arguments. First of all, the Russian Almaz-Antey Corporation, the developer of the Buk air defense system, conducted a full-scale experiment and hit an aircraft with a missile of this system. The results of the experiment, among other things, conclusively proved that the missile had been launched from the area of Zaroshenskaya settlement. Let me remind you that at that time it was under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Secondly, the Russian Ministry of Defense declassified information about the missile, which, according to the Dutch investigators, had shot down the Malaysian Boeing. In accordance with these documents, the missile with serial number 8868720 was sent to Ukraine in Soviet times on December 29, 1986, and transported to military unit 20152, which had been deployed in the Lvov region. And thirdly, Russian experts proved that the video about the alleged Russian Buk movement on the territory of Ukraine was a fake. An animation was made on the basis of a single photo. The pictures of a tractor, a trailer and a Buk vehicle were implanted in the picture of the corresponding street in Lugansk. Moreover, independent Western experts collected a lot of materials that cast a shadow on the official investigation. However, the joint investigation team ignores them because this information does not fit into a pre-planned scenario of the provocation. For example, Dutch blogger Max van der Werf visited the Boeing crash area several times. The conclusions of his investigations refute statements of Russian involvement in the tragedy. Private detective from Germany Joseph Resch was ready to give the Dutch the information about the causes of the tragedy, the names of the responsible people and the data from American satellites. However, the investigators also rejected his proposal. These facts, as well as many others, clearly and irrefutably prove that Russia was not involved in the Boeing crash. But they do not answer the main question: who is responsible? Basing on the analysis of the secret documents of the Ukrainian intelligence services, as well as personal meetings and conversations with witnesses of those events, I came to an unambiguous conclusion. The Malaysian Boeing was shot down by the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is not a fateful coincidence of random circumstances, but a pre-planned and well-concealed operation of the security agencies of Kiev and its Western partners. This is proved by the documents and facts collected and systematized by my assistants and me from the Center of Journalistic Investigations. And to begin with, let me show you an interesting document that I obtained during my work in the security service of Ukraine. This is the protocol resolution of the meeting of President of Ukraine Petro Poroshenko and heads of the security agencies on September 7, 2014. The document is marked as for official use only. It is big enough, but point 21st of this document is of special interest for our investigation. I will translate it into Russian and quote it. Ensure the presence of intelligence services agents during the investigation by the Malaysian representatives at the crash site of the Boeing 777. coordinate and align all issues concerning the Malaysian investigation exclusively with the Dutch investigation board. I will translate the official language of the document into the common. First, the Ukrainian side assigns its intelligence services to investigate the disaster instead of the investigative authorities. Second, Malaysia, which owned the downed Boeing, actually was pushed to the periphery of the investigation, and the priority is given to the Dutch side. As you know, Ukraine and its western partners blamed the rebels of the Donetsk Republic at the same day of the disaster. If we take this version, it would be logical to expect the officials of the Donetsk Republic will do everything to prevent a full and objective investigation of the incident, to try to cover up their tracks. Therefore, when we conducted our investigation at the crash site, we paid special attention to this issue. What did we find out? First of all, immediately after the crash of the liner, the Prosecutor General's Office of the Donetsk Republic started a criminal case on the fact of mass murder of 3 or more persons, which was later reclassified as a terrorist attack. Secondly, the staff of the Prosecutor General's Office of the Donetsk Republic told us they collected the most complete evidence in the criminal case and were ready to provide it to the experts of the GIT. The Prosecutor General's Office of the Donetsk People's Republic repeatedly turned to law enforcement authorities of foreign countries and to the joint investigation team during the investigation with an offer of help. We are ready to cooperate. However, there was no response to our appeals. And this is despite the fact that forensic experts of the police and the Bureau of Forensic Medical Examination of the Donetsk Republic conducted a thorough investigation at the crash site and collected a large amount of materials and evidence. There is another interesting thing. Donetsk forensic experts conducted studies of all bodies except for the dead crew members. And it begs the question, why? I can tell from my experience that such examinations should be done with participants of representatives of the International Commission which conducts the investigation. Donetsk Republic Emergencies Minister Alexei Kostrubitsky also told us some important details about the work of the GIT at the crash site. What did you give to foreign representatives in the summer of 2014? We gave the bodies from the crash scene to foreign representatives in summer 2014. There were 282 bodies and 87 fragments. We also transferred navigation equipment and flight data recorders. We didn't transfer hull and construction parts because nobody cared about them. Such actions of the Dutch side raise a lot of questions. It seems that until November 2014 no one in the investigation board was interested in the wreckage of the downed Boeing. But in April 2015, activity of the Dutch side just went off scale. Even the soil was collected from the crash site. It is obvious that these actions were taken in order to remove even the smallest parts of the aircraft or missile striking elements from the Donetsk area, as their examination could shed light on the causes of the disaster. It reminds me of the episode of the Maidan shooting. All the trees on the Grushevskaya and Institutskaya streets, hit by the sniper shots, were cut down as soon as the new authorities came to power in Kiev. After that, there was no opportunity to determine the direction of fire. Since we are talking about the destruction of evidence of Ukraine's involvement in the Boeing crash, it is impossible to skip some mysterious facts. Casual death of Andrei Taranov. He was the deputy head of the Ukrainian President's administration who supervised all the security agencies. By the way, in 2013-2014 he was Director General for Administrative Work of Borispol Airport. The sudden suicide of a pilot of the Ukrainian Air Force, Vladislav Voloshin, who could also shed light on the circumstances of the Malaysian Boeing crash. But the most mysterious was the disappearance of the Dnepropetrovsk airport dispatcher Anna Petrenko, who had followed up the MH17 flight on July 17, 2014. The joint investigation team's assertion that the Donetsk militia obtained the Buk air defense system doesn't stand any criticism either. All the witnesses we interviewed unequivocally stated that there were no such missile systems in Donbass region. There were no specialists able to maintain them as well. I know everything about their arms and equipment to the last barrel. They had nothing more than 3 Harley Dragon armored personnel carriers and 1 anti-aircraft cannon. I have never seen the Buk system in the DPR's territory in 5 years of war. I'd like to tell you about the rebels' training level. The Boeing and these 6,000 or 10,000 meters are inaccessible heights for them. Our interlocutors paid attention to one more issue. At that time it was hard to keep something a secret among the militiamen. If there actually was a Buk vehicle passing through the Donetsk region, particularly in the daytime, in a densely populated area, the information about it would instantly spread among the people and social networks. You should take into account the national peculiarities of our region that is often called Malorossia. It is impossible to force people to keep silent and not to brag here. They would take photos of the passing or standing Buk from afar, and it should be standing on a combat position or moving down from a platform which tows it. It cannot be hidden. No way. The Ukrainian side and its Western partners present the interception of the militia's telephone conversations as one of the main evidence of rebels and Russian involvement in the Malaysian aircraft crash. But the militiamen who we talked to called them completely faked. They were genuinely surprised when they heard and recognized their voices. Moreover, they were ready to believe in the content of telephone conversations, but for one thing. As far as I know, MTS was the Ukrainian provider, and SBU recorded all the phone calls. They still can edit any phrase from those samples. They can even fake that I killed my mother. Those who arranged that act of provocation have all the technical means at their disposal to forge any radio or phone conversations. As for me, I'm really struck by the naivety and credulity of foreign experts who took the materials passed by the Security Service of Ukraine at their face value. Though this special service had been repeatedly criticized for unprofessional and often obscene methods of work. Just remember a story of a staged murder of journalist Arkady Babchenko that revolted the whole world. But the political conjuncture apparently very often prevails over the reputation of this intelligence agency. Another argument that proves the fraudulent nature of telephone conversation is the amazingly short time period after the crash that they were uploaded to the internet. I will explain, referring to the experience in operational divisions of security service. To make the wiretapping materials public, they need to be declassified. This is required by the law Ukraine on state secrets. Without this procedure, the use of materials in the public domain, including uploading them to the internet, is strictly prohibited. This procedure takes quite a long period of time, at least a few days. There was a moment that immediately drew my attention in the situation with the Boeing crash. Records of the intercepted telephone conversations of militia leaders appeared on the internet almost instantly after the crash. So the rigged conversations of the militia commander called Hmury were posted on YouTube on July 18, 2014. And a conversation of rebel named Besler was uploaded even earlier, on July 17, 2014, that said, only in a few hours after the disaster. Such a phenomenally fast response of the Security Service of Ukraine clearly indicates only one thing. The Secret Service knew in advance about the impending provocation and was ready to quickly legalize the materials of falsified telephone conversations of the militia. The goal is to impose on the world community as soon as possible the opinion of the Donetsk Republic militia as the perpetrators of this terrorist act. As we are talking about the fraud in the story of the downed Boeing, I will give you another example of rigging which was used by the security service of Ukraine. The Ukrainian side tried to convince the world community that its armed forces were outside the weapon engagement zone for the Malaysian plane at the time of the disaster and physically could not shoot down the Boeing with a Buk missile. It could be so if we took into account the tactical characteristics of a missile that are 35 kilometers of range and 22 kilometers of height. According to the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, its troops were located far to the south of Amrosievka town, which theoretically and practically makes it impossible to hit Boeing by a Ukrainian Buk missile. But did this disposition correspond to the reality? We conducted a significant part of our investigation directly in the area of Shakhtersk and Snezhnoye, talked to local residents, and here's what we found. I could see this wooded area that stretched up to Amrosievka. There were combat vehicles standing near this wood, lots of vehicles. We are on the border of Amrosievka and Shakhtersk regions. The Ukrainian forces came here at the end of June or at the beginning of July 2014. They were positioned along this ravine. Heavy vehicles were here. Lower in the wooded area, there were soldiers and howitzers. There was a motor convoy on the road to Malaya Shishov. We saw a lot of wheel and track traces, many ration wraps. There was no continuous front line then. We are now near the train shelters where the Ukrainian forces were located in 2014. The Ukrainian troops were positioned on this hill. It is between Shapushnikovo and the town of Shakhtersk. In fact, there was no solid front line. The Ukrainian troops actually moved freely in the area. This was confirmed by the participants and eyewitnesses of those events. There was no solid battle line. Combat actions were conducted locally. The Ukrainian tanks could freely come around the town of Snezhnoye. The Ukrainian units were moving around that area as if they were at home. It is not only possible that our enemies held Pervomaisk, it was really so. Why did the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine distort the true front line on the published maps, while reducing the territory controlled by its own forces? What's the point? The history of armed conflicts shows us that the belligerents tend to exaggerate the territories they have seized. Remember, for example, with what passion the Ukrainians promoted each square meter of the Donbas region taken under their control. But in this case, it was the other way around. And in my opinion, it was made in order to conceal the movement of the Ukrainian military forces in this area, including air defense systems. I'd like to draw your attention to the map again. Now we know for sure that the Ukrainian troops were inside the 35-kilometer zone from the hit point of the Boeing and had a real opportunity to shoot down the Malaysian aircraft by a Buk missile. As you can see, many arguments of Ukraine and its Western partners are rather shaky and unconvincing. This is not surprising. After all, their evidence is built on data from social networks and information fabricated by the Ukrainian special services. Thus, Ukraine is trying to manipulate the investigation and public opinion. Remember, at least as in summer 2019, on the anniversary of the tragedy, the Security Service of Ukraine loudly declared it captured the driver of the truck that allegedly transported a Buk launcher, And as soon as the press conference was over service, the intelligence agency's press office denied its own statements on its website. We have received evidence that largely refutes the position of the official investigation and forces to look at the disaster in a different way. Now I'd like to tell you about a very interesting and, as it became clear later, rather crucial episode from my career. On July 8, 2014, as security service officer, I participated in a conference at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. The meeting was headed by Council's Vice Chairman, Colonel General Mikhail Koval. The issues of armed forces involvement in the so-called anti-terrorist operation in Donbass were discussed. Right after the end of the conference, I became a happenstance witness of talk between Colonel General Koval and the representative of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. The member of the Defense Department in a low and trusting voice told Koval, "It's clear that if Russia breaks up the conflict, we have no chances to withstand. They'll easily crush us." Koval calmly answered, "I was hinted that Russia will have a serious challenge soon. They won't interfere. They won't have time for that." 9 days later, Malaysian Boeing was downed. And General Koval's mysterious answer immediately emerged in my mind. How did it become possible that a passenger plane was shot down over Ukraine? One of the reasons, as you know, is that Ukraine didn't close the airspace of the combat area. Frankly speaking, on May 2, 2014, General Vasily Krutov, the head of the Anti-Terrorist Center, signed an order which restricted the flights over the Donetsk region. All international air companies were to be informed. I should point out that the document contains a mistake promoting Krutov to a higher rank. Colonel and General. Krutov was a Lieutenant General, in fact. Given the fact that the airspace over the combat area wasn't closed, there appears a question: who could give another instructions as to ignore the order of the anti-terrorist center chief? The answer is clear: only country's top leadership. Here's one more little known but very important fact that proves that the Ukrainian intelligence agencies and their Western allies thoroughly prepared the secret operation of downing a civil plane in advance. A month before the tragedy, a radio location station in the town of Artyomovsk, which covered the whole Donbass region, was brought out of operation. Having it in service could make it possible to detect the launching place of a missile that hit the Malaysian Boeing. Turn your attention to this document. The Ukrainian Minister of Infrastructure reports to the Security Services Anti-Terrorist Center that the radar in Artyomovsk was brought out of operation in June 2014. Who did it? As it said in the report, unidentified persons. The persons were really unidentified, but I'm aware of their affiliation to the Ukrainian armed forces with no doubts. They were servicemen of the 3rd Regiment of the Special Operation Forces of Ukraine. Their unit was located in Artyomovsk at that period of time. As is known, the Special Operation Forces are directly trained for sabotage operations. It's rather curious that Ukrainian media didn't widely cover the fact that the radar which controlled the airspace of the Donbass region was brought out of operation. However, if there was a noise in the press, the Ukrainians could easily accuse Donbass rebels of the accident. Speaking about the fact that Ukraine didn't close the airspace of the combat area, I can also mention another important thing. The US satellite intelligence actively monitored the Donbass region. Collected data were transferred from the CIA to Ukraine via official channels. Here are just some of the photos that I managed to obtain. Have a look. Here are photos for the 16th and the 21st of July. They both demonstrate the suburbs of the town of Snezhnoye. But where are the pictures for the 17th of July 2014 when the Malaysian Boeing was downed? Right after the tragedy, US President Barack Obama claimed that the USA had those photos. So, why did the US hide them from the world? Apparently, they didn't want to upset their special operation. In search for additional evidence that Ukraine and its Western allies were behind the Boeing crash, we naturally collected information about the Ukrainian units that had book systems in service. We found out that there was just one military unit like that in Donbass in summer 2014. It was 156th Anti-Aircraft Regiment of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Its 3 divisions covered the most important administrative and industrial centers of the region – Donetsk, Mariupol and Lugansk. As the Anti-Terrorist Center's Order number 33/323 points out, 156th Anti-Aircraft Regiment was put to the list of military units participating in the anti-terrorist operation from May 23, 2014. It means that its personnel and military equipment were used in combat operations in Donbass. The other anti-aircraft missile regiment listed in a document didn't have book vehicles in service. We also found 2 eyewitnesses who are serving in People's Militia of the Donetsk Republic now. But in summer 2014, they served in voluntary service at the Ukrainian Armed Forces and, in particular, in a 2nd Division of 156th Anti-Aircraft Regiment in Mariupol. I got into the 2nd Division of 156th Anti-Aircraft Regiment. There were 9 Buk M1 vehicles. These soldiers, and we talked to each of them separately, told us very important thing. At the beginning of July 2014, the unit was unexpectedly withdrawn from combat alert service and left Mariupol for unknown direction. Noteworthy is that enlisted soldiers stayed at the permanent base. Only officers and contracting soldiers left the base. All the actions were carefully camouflaged. Vehicles' pennant numbers were painted out, and servicemen were forced to hand over their cell phones. Vehicles were loaded onto tow cars, and the motor convoy was formed. In 4 days it moved out. I don't know where to. Only contracting soldiers left the base. 1 or 2 crash trucks moved out too. They carried Buk missiles. When they returned, they told us that they were at the training range, and that's all. When we asked them about Buk launches, nobody answered directly, as if they were instructed what to say. Divisional Commander Lieutenant Colonel Lyshenko, he headed the motor convoy. His Deputy Major Shevchenko, 1st Battery Commander Captain Stavlin, his Deputy Senior Lieutenant Mamaychuk, 2nd Battery Commander Captain Grabar, his Deputy Lieutenant Sedov, 3rd Battery Commander Captain Kruglov. I don't remember his deputy. The soldiers communicated with their colleagues later, and after all they realized that the 2nd Division had moved to the combat area and had launched at least 1 Buk missile. In September 2014, one of the contracting servicemen who had gone on mission published in his social media account a photo of the Buk vehicle after a missile launch. I asked him questions if there were any exercises or Buk missile launches, but after that he blacklisted me in the social media of Kontakte and deleted the picture. In addition to all mentioned, I have one more serious fact. It is hard to explain this with a common logic. As you remember, during the summer 2014, Kyiv actively spread the reports accusing the Russian armed forces of direct invasion in Ukraine, including in the Mariupol region. And exactly in that time, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command took a decision to withdraw the only anti-aircraft unit which could oppose the modern aircraft rate. You should admit that it looks oddly enough. Upholding the version that Boeing crash was a result of a pre-planned provocation, let's assume who could instigate it and gain profit from it. We can remember hasty statements of the Western leaders who put the blame for the tragedy on Russia at once, as well as avert ignorance of the joint investigation team to any evidence presented by Moscow. It is also remarkable that the main accusatory versions against Russia were made by the Bellingcat organization. This project was officially launched just 2 days before the disaster. The United States and UK special services are said to stand behind the Bellingcat. In my opinion, it was the United Kingdom that was a source of provocation, and now it controls the fictive investigation process. It is not surprising that a flight data recorder was passed to British laboratory Farnborough for expertise. The UK doesn't spare money trying to find the evidence of Russian involvement. For example, former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt said that London allocated 100,000 British pounds for maintenance of MH17 judicial proceedings. Here is another document about British interference from my archive. It is dated back to June 12, 2014. This type of document is called Teshka among the officers of the Ukrainian Security Service. 2 persons are mentioned in this document. The first one is Kubinets. It was a call sign of the Chief of Staff of the Anti-Terrorist Center, Colonel Sergei Sigarev. Another one is Medved. It was a devolved call sign of a Chief of the Operations Group of the Ukrainian Security Service in the Anti-Terrorist Operations Zone. Kubinets notified Medved that on June 22, 2014, the Chief of Counterintelligence Department of the Ukrainian Security Service, Major General Valery Kondratyuk, would go to Donbass on a mission. He would accompany 2 agents of the British Security Services. Kubinets strictly demanded to limit the circle of people who were informed about the Brits. So, on June 22, 2014, Chief of the Counterintelligence Department Kondratyuk and 2 British agents arrived to the anti-terrorist operation zone. The next day, Kondratyuk returned to Kiev, and all the operations group of the Ukrainian Security Service left too. Everyone, apart from 1 person. Lieutenant Colonel Vasily Burba stayed at the area of anti-terrorist operation. By chance, Vasily Burba was in the operational group that replaced my colleagues and me in the anti-terrorist area in early June 2014. I'm acquainted with many officers who at that moment were in the main camp of the Ukrainian forces in the settlement of Genka, on the border between Kharkiv and Donetsk regions, and I know Vasily Burba as well. It was Burba who contacted the British agents with the Ukrainian servicemen and who participated in provocation with Boeing. The Brits stayed at a hotel called 7 Winds, that is situated at Izium town outskirts. They held their clandestine meetings at this hotel. Burba came there by the service car Mitsubishi Outlander. Later, the careers of these 2 officers of the Ukrainian Security Service would be closely tied. Burba was only a lieutenant colonel in June 2014 and was in dishonor for participating in breaking up with the Maidan events. Just in a month, became an officer for special missions, a chief of counterintelligence department Kondratyuk. In 2015, Kondratyuk was promoted to the chief of the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and Burba followed him to that organization. After Kondratyuk was appointed to the position of the president's deputy chief of staff, Burba took his place as the chief of the main intelligence directorate. Up to now, both of the participants of that terrible provocation are closely tied and they're making a great career. It sounds almost impossible, but Vasily Burba has grown from lieutenant colonel in 2014 to colonel general in 2018. In his turn, Vasily Lyshenko, the commander of the 2nd Division of 156 Anti-Aircraft Regiment, was decorated with the high-level State Award, the Order of Danilo Galitsky. And this is noteworthy considering the fact that in no occasions the Ukrainian air defense forces were used for their straight purpose in the anti-terrorist operation area. Summing up the Great Britain's role in this provocation, I'll show you one more document. As is shown in the document, Peter Culver, a representative of the Australian intelligence agency, headed the Australian expert group that arrived in Ukraine to investigate the crash. I'd like to emphasize that it was not a prosecutor or an investigator, but the intelligence officer. And one more surprising thing was that he had a British phone number, country code +44. That really makes sense. Thus, we collected enough information and documents that allow us to draw a firm conclusion. The Boeing crash was a provocation that had been planned and realized by the Ukrainian top leadership and the Western intelligence agencies. The algorithm is the following. The preparatory stage of the provocation included the following actions. Fictive records of the rebels' phone conversations were created. Air above the conflict zone was left open for flights. The line of contact on the maps of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine was purposely changed. The Ukrainian officials prepared beforehand their statements for the press. The radar near the town of Artyomovsk was knocked out of service. And the 2nd Division of 156 Anti-Aircraft Regiment advanced from Mariupol to the anti-terrorist operation area with unprecedented camouflage measures. During the active stage of the provocation, one battery of the 2nd Division of 156 Anti-Aircraft Regiment launched a Buk missile in the area between Ambrosivka at the south and Shakhtersk at the north, and after that secretly abandoned its fire position. In my opinion, these following persons were involved in the provocation: Petro Poroshenko, the President of Ukraine; Alexander Turchinov, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine; Viktor Muzhenko, the Chief of the General Staff; Valentin Nalivachenko, the Chief of the Security Service of Ukraine; Vasily Gritsak, the Chief of the Anti-Terrorist Center; Valery Kondratyev, the Chief of the Counterintelligence Department of the Security Service; Vasily Burba, the Security Service Officer; Lieutenant Colonel Lyshenko, the Commander of the 2nd Division of 156 Anti-Aircraft Regiment. The British intelligence agents supervised this covert operation. Now we have the answer for a question: who got the profit? The main beneficiaries in this tragedy were Ukraine, her foreign partners, and handlers. Western countries, in particular the United Kingdom, pursued a goal to tie hands of Russia as a geopolitical competitor to maintain Kiev's maximal auspicious opportunities for rebellions, eliminations in Donbass, and certainly to present the Donbass militia to international community as terrorists and murderers. The next steps of Ukraine and Western intelligence agencies are focused on the dissemination of false information, confusion of international community, and pressing on judicial proceedings, which will start in March 2020. But I still hope that the court will make a fair and unbiased decision. For my part, I'd like to express my condolences to all relatives of those who died in MH17 catastrophe.